Alright guys, time for another little content drop here. I've been pretty much just keeping my face buried in school work, but also playing World of Warcraft. Alright, I have completed raid on normal. I just did that this morning. All bosses. Honestly, super fun. I had a great time. I think this is a really, really good raid. Maybe like the best raid that they've ever made. I haven't like consistently played all of the raids in every expansion like at launch, like that. But and I'm not like a mythic raider or anything. I've only really done normal and heroic. But in terms of the fun factor that I've been having, especially on a healer this expansion, it's been great. Pretty much all the bosses are fun. Not really any complaints. Um, I've been doing really, really consistently like top healing too in all these pug groups, which I should say that as well, guys. I'm just like a pretty much a pug player only. I don't tend to play at the same time that my friends do. Sometimes we do, and we manage to like plan stuff, but for the most part, I'm just like joining random pickup groups to do my content. Um, and I've been like the top healer all the time, every time. This is not what like the competitive organized healers are doing. There are evokers and priests, discipline priests doing like 140 to close to 150k healing per second, which is pretty crazy. But they're like, optimizing their stats. They have, fully enchanted gear. They've got all their crafts in and embellishments and stuff like that that they can at this point. Um, so there's some discrepancy there. Not claiming that I'm like, a 99% parser or anything by any means. I'm just saying that like this is achievable for you guys as like regular players to do this kind of healing on Discipline Priest for sure. And I have been consistently the highest healer that I've seen in my groups. How am I doing that? Partially through kind of like my own concoction of talents, partially through following like creators and Warcraft logs. What I do want to say about that though is like the Wowhead guides, and this isn't like a slight at Automatic Jack who does the priest Wowhead guides, but his builds and gear instructions are not the same as what like the top raiders use. They're not a lot different, but they're a little bit different, and that could be the difference for you guys. So I am just gonna say, Warcraft logs is a great resource. But like going out and doing your own research and testing and looking at like what the top players are doing is also a really good idea. So I recommend you guys kind of utilize both. Um, Speaking of gear and stuff like that, I am 248 item level, which is like, I mean, I guess decently high for like the average player maybe, but like, again, very doable without, being super organized about it or anything. I have the renown items, and I've done my delves for champion pieces, my, hard mode, hunts or prey, whatever, for some items. Um, Still have a veteran weapon. Not optimized trinkets, but decent trinkets. Two pretty good, like I'd say like B plus or A minus tier trinkets, and that's about it, guys. So no like my I've got a few ring enchants. So ring enchants for like cheap stats here. I've got the cheap stat enchant on my legs. I don't even have the chest enchanted. No weapon enchant or anything like that. So that's the gear that I have currently. And for talents, we're going to do kind of like a brief overview here and some synergies and talk about what's going on. This is pretty much a direct copy of the top discipline priest from Warcraft logs. There's like three players that are up in like the like high, like 130, 140, 150 K HPS range, and they're running this build. It's pretty much the same across all the fights. The one thing that sometimes changes here is encroaching shadows. If there is like ads or the council, something like that, multiple enemies, you can spread your pains out really quickly this way without having to waste global cooldowns. Um, Noticeably here, we're not taking pain suppression, which is interesting. I would say I tried it a lot of the different ways. We are kind of just like a DPS turret that heals. So pain suppression isn't really super necessary. I found in most of these fights, For the most part, if a DPS is gonna die, they're just gonna die, and you can't always react fast enough to use pain suppression anyways. But I might recommend just like taking it as kind of like a last ditch button you can press on somebody who's taking a mechanic, or like the tank who's getting blasted or something. This is kind of what I would probably recommend. I'm not exactly sure why they skip it a lot on these Warcraft log builds, to be honest. But something like this would be what I'd recommend personally for you guys. Some notable synergies would be kind of like our basic rotation, which is like we are taking the whole shadow side, or the majority of the shadow side, with the buffed Shadow Word Pain through this node and this node here. So basically what we do is we just put our pain on the enemy, and we spread pain if there's multiple enemies, whether manually or with these talents here. And then we are consuming the pain through our expiation talent. 2 seconds of Shadow Word Pain, dealing damage equal to 300% of the amount consumed. So the more Shadow Word Pain damage, the more that consume is going to do through expiation. So you're basically upkeeping pain, consuming pain with Mind Blast and Shadow Word Death. While you're casting your Mind Blast and your Shadow Word Death, you are gaining Power of the Dark Side through the Dark Indulgence talent with your Mind Blast. You are gaining extensions on your Mind Bender and your Shadow Fiends through Inescapable Torment when you cast Mind Blast, Shadow Word Death, and Penance on an enemy. Your Shadow Fiend and Mind Bender will teleport, and their duration is extended, so lots of damage there. Let me just kind of showcase. So here's my healing. The majority of it is atonement healing, so we're mostly healing through just straight damage. A little bit of Void Shield healing, some direct penance, and then some talents from the Oracle. In terms of our damage, though, which is kind of what I was trying to get to here, look at this, guys. So this is kind of the thing. I'm, between like 20 and 25k DPS usually on these meters, which is like tank damage in these groups that I'm in. And the other healers are like way behind, which is pretty common, especially for pug groups. But like, we're doing decent damage and, top healing, right? But what is our damage? So our damage is still mostly penance. We did get a 20% penance buff on the last balance patch update. And then just straight ticks of Shadow Word Pain. Void Shield, which is actually doing a ton of damage for this one talent point here. It's 4 total, right? But like getting to this 4th talent point, so 1 talent point, right? Void Shield reflecting 25% of damage taken to enemies, causing atonement healing. It's actually doing a ton of damage because it's a spread. So the Void Shields go to a lot of your allies. You can, with the 2 charges of Penance, since we're an Oracle, we are acquiring those Void Shield procs really, really, really consistently, and we're spreading our Void Shields out a lot. So we're getting a lot of return on investment from that 1 talent point through our Void Shield damage and atonement healing there. So that's actually a lot of damage from Void Shield. But then you see the Expiation and Inescapable Torment together doing about like 20 to 25% of our damage as well. So Inescapable Torment and Expiation. This is pretty easy to optimize. You basically just like Shadow Word Pain is up, you extend your Shadow Word Pain through your Painful Punishment talent, and you consume your Shadow Word Pain with your Expiation, right? You kind of want to keep your pains at like 10 seconds or more on your targets because about 8 seconds is consumed with Expiation. But that's basically all we're doing. The only kind of other things that I'll kind of touch on as to like why we take maybe like this left side is this Eternal Barrier talent does buff our Void Shield. That's kind of why we want it. We're not getting a huge benefit from Divine Aegis. Let me see HPS. Yeah, it's 3% of our healing goes into our Divine Aegis. It is a little bit noticeable. Sometimes you are going to want to be pumping your penances defensively into targets that are really low or about to die, or taking like a tank taking a heavy mechanic or something. You'll pump a penance directly into them as opposed to penancing the enemy. Penancing the enemy is generally what you want to do, though, because that's giving your atonement healing out to many targets. You do get a little bit of atonement healing from directly healing an ally with your penance as well, but more spread healing is achieved through offensive penances, right? So in defensive penance, in some situations where it's like an oh crap moment and you need to heal someone quickly, you can defensively penance them. When you do that, it is almost always going to crit at least a couple of times, and you'll be gaining some Divine Aegis procs there. Also, because of this inner focus talent, Flash Shield, Powered Shield, Penance, and Powered Radiance are having a 20% increased chance to critically heal. The Just because we're talking about critical strike here, guys, in terms of stats, a big thing is the optimal trinkets you guys are going to want to have is going to be this Crucible of Erratic Energies, which is the Renown trinket. And then also there's a trinket that's called, like, the Drum. I forget what it's called. Drum of something. Drum of Renewed Bonds, right? Which I foolishly, like last week, because I didn't think this was going to be the trinket I was going to run, disenchanted my Drum of Renewed Bonds. I did have a maxed out Drum of Renewed Bonds. Got rid of it. I wish I had it back. Because all of the Warcraft log's top healer discipline priests are running both of those together. They're running the Crucible and the Drum because both give critical strike procs. So they're valuing the critical strike a lot, very, very heavily. When you get those procs, your critical strike goes up like massively, and then with the increase to the critical strike chance, critical heal chance from your inner focus, you get like 70%, 80% chance to critically heal, which is really, really good. So that's kind of why we're doing that. This is going to be kind of like a set it and forget it. Pretty much like as you see here. You do have that one kind of point to play around with, but everything else is sort of like set in stone. We're getting a lot of atonement uptime from our indemnity, powered shields, void shields being AoE, so lots of AoE atonement spread through just casting void shield on those procs, proccing void shields with our double charges of penance, right, from being an oracle. So yeah, that's pretty much it, guys. I'll kind of end it there and just sort of let you guys. Oh, you know what? One more thing. We don't really have very many cooldowns as a discipline priest. We just have our evangelism and our ultimate penitence. But I do want to kind of touch on just like how to utilize our cooldowns really quickly as the last thing to touch on. It's a good habit as a discipline priest or just a priest in general to be not looking at your healing per second, right? Check that after the encounter. But always have your DPS meter up because you can evaluate which DPS player should be getting your power infusion, okay? If there's multiple priests in the raid or party, communicate with them and talk about who's going to PI which person. Obviously, that's kind of a min-max thing, but it is just a good idea, a good habit to get into. PI either the best DPS or potentially sometimes if a class is especially good at using haste, because that's what PI does, is give haste. You can potentially do that instead. You can like PI a very good haste user. But for the most part, in pug groups, just PI the highest DPS target, especially if you're the only priest in the raid. Other than that, I kind of already said evangelism pretty much on cooldown. Potentially pairing it up with some like heavy damage moments if you want to save it and there's not much damage going out. You could save it, but for the most part, we want to be spamming evangelism on cooldown because we want the Mindbender out pretty much all the time to gain benefits from our talents, etc. And that's really the only two like spammable cooldowns. The only other one that we have is a 4-minute cooldown Ultimate Penitence. This is a really, really strong cooldown. It basically saves the raid group whenever you have it when it's up. Don't hold this. You pretty much want to use this whenever you can. Not like right at the beginning of the encounter, but like if like the first big damage phase that comes out after you've evangelismed and you've spread your radiances and your atonements around and you've done some regular healing that way. Usually in the beginning of raid boss encounters, like a big event will happen kind of towards the beginning. And that's a perfect time to use your Ultimate Penitence because probably in another 4 minutes, another big event's going to happen again. You'll have it up again. You don't want to be saving it because you want to be utilizing your cooldowns as much as possible. All right. That covers it, guys. I'll leave it there. I definitely recommend try Discipline Priest out to try the build. Prioritizing, haste crit mastery with your stats. And have fun out there, guys. Catch you on the next one. Peace.